Yourself out. So what you were saying, interesting question.
Yes.
Okay.
So the question is interesting. You know, when you try to put it in the context of what's a good father or a bad father, I honestly don't feel qualified to answer that question. I feel as a father, you know, I'm going to do the best that I can, you know, to do all the things that we're taught, to be that provider, right?
Okay.
To teach, you know, our children, you know, if you got boys, to teach them, you know, what a man looks like, you know, for daughters, you know, what they should be expecting, you know, in a man. And, you know, I hope to be that example for them. But to be able to say, you know, I can say I feel like I'm a good father, right? But at the end of the day, it's going to be them that says, yes, he was, or no, he wasn't. And this is why. Because a lot of times we feel like, you know, as long as we're doing the things that we know we can do or should be doing for them, that's enough.
Okay.
Right? But, you know, I think the other part of it is communication. Because sometimes when we think we're doing enough, they still have needs, but they don't know how to voice it.
Okay.
So, you know, and my whole thing is I want my kids to be open enough to talk to me, so whatever it is, you know, I can be there to help, you know, or advise. Maybe I'm not the one that can help, but maybe I can lead them to where they can find that help, you know. I always want to be encouraging, you know, because whatever their dreams are, I don't want to be that, you know, deadbeat downer that you can't do that. I want them to go for the moon.
Okay.
You know, and, you know, sometimes, you know, as a father, I feel like I have to push.
Okay.
And I can tell you, and they may not nod their heads right now, but, you know, sometimes they push back.
Okay.
Right? And the only reason I push is because I want the best for them. You know, and which most fathers want, most parents want. Right? For their children to have better than what they had. You know, and, you know, so, and I say all that to say, you know, I can't answer that question if I'm a good father.
Okay.
You know, I feel like I am, but only my siblings, my kids, you know, can answer that question.
Okay. Hey, listen, I think that, I mean, like I said, it's a very, like, just thought-provoking question because, you know, like you said before, man, there are tons of things that we do, and our intention is good. You know, we feel like, hey, bro, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right by my kid. I'm doing this. I'm doing that, but it don't seem like it's enough. And so, I guess the question is like, how do you make sure that the needs that the kids have that may go, you know, uncommunicated or not properly communicated, how do you make sure that those needs get heard, seen, understood? Like, is there something that has helped you to kind of like process that, or have you observe and you recognize that, okay, man, there's a little bit more here? You know, what have you found in your experience as a father that's helped you? Because I think that's what you said is so important, because I think a lot of disappointment comes from unfulfilled expectations.
Right.
And sometimes somebody's expecting you to do something, but they didn't tell you that they're expecting you to do something.
Right.
And you don't know, so you can't do what you don't know.
Right. And I think, the biggest part there is always allowing the door to be open.
Okay.
And letting them know that they can talk to you about anything, because a lot of times, as kids, there's that fear that if I say this, I know I'm gonna get in trouble. And trying to keep that door open, that don't worry about the trouble or the consequence. Get it out. So that you don't have to carry that burden, of whatever it is. And I think that's the hard part for them to trust. And I see that, and what I find is, without pressure, right? It comes out. And then you can, try to address it. But, sometimes, as a parent, your child, how they act, or when something's not right with them, or, and so you start asking, what's on your mind? What's going on? And stuff. And, you get that nothing,
it's more to than nothing.
Right. And then, but eventually it does come. And I think sometimes when you're asking that question, they may still be in a processing state, right? Or even trying to figure out, hey, I am going to talk about this, but I need to figure out my words, right? And stuff. So, I think sometimes we just need to allow that space for them to go through their process, to bring it to us.
I like it, man. I think that's a good approach. And I think the interesting thing about what you're saying is this, and sometimes as kids, we don't necessarily recognize that there's no manual. There's no kind of guide that says, here's the perfect way to do this.
Right.
And I think, sometimes it will be in our best benefit to give our parents some grace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're just trying to figure it out, man.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that you get more things right than you do wrong. And, like you said, your intent at the end of the day is loving. It's, wanting the best for your child.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so hopefully, I had somebody talk earlier today, and it was just like, everything that he does, he wants to convey that. You know what I mean? In all of his actions and everything that he does, because he said, he don't want his kids thinking that, like, shoot, he just being a butthole, man. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, my dad is just this, he always on me. He always this, he always that. He's like, man, I want my kids to understand, like, I'm gonna push you, I'm gonna be hard on you, I'm gonna challenge you at times, but I'm gonna do so in love. And so love is always, I'm like always going to lead with love. And so I just think it's interesting, because some people don't think about that. They don't take that into account. Like I said, there ain't no blueprint on how to do this thing. And I think you a father of 3 or 4?
4.
4. Your father of 4.
Yeah.
So, I think you could probably speak to, or the realization that, like, just cause something worked with one kid don't mean that it's gonna work with the next. It's just like a different process and strategy for each one, because everybody's their own individual. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and you definitely have to, as a parent, you see the differences. You talk differently to one than you talk to another, because you have to fit, their personality, to your point, that individual self.
So let me ask you this. Have you been accused of any favoritism oh, well, you treating this one like this, or you doing this like this, or you doing this like that. Because I think, as a kid, like you said, you as a parent recognize that, hey, man, you're different from this person.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily recognize that. So the way that you approach this kid, why you came at me like this and you only came at that person like that? Have you had any of those challenges?
I think I have.
Okay.
And, and sometimes, sometimes it's warranted. Mm-hmm. And, as a parent, sometimes you don't even know you're doing it because of that individualness. Okay. And, for, just Jay and Junior, they're both, before me and Tanya got married, it was just me and Junior. Mm. And it was just her and Jay.
Right.
So they had that one-on-one. Mm. And so, becoming that blended family, it was one of those things where, you try to, parent both as your own.
Yeah.
Right? And, I think that at the same time, I want Junior to feel like, hey, you're still my son, and Jay, you're my son too.
Yeah.
And and the same for Tanya. And so sometimes I think it's tough because you're coming from that it's just been me to now it's we, type thing. And so I think that happens unintentionally sometimes, but they have called us out on that.
Okay.
And we ask for examples.
Okay.
And I think that it's a constant state of work to continue to be fair. And try between the both of them and stuff like that. So hey, we about to hit 4 years, of marriage
nice.
now.
Nice.
And so, but it's work that we put in, and we just keep trying to, make it that whole family unit and stuff. So,
and I love that, man. I love that. And I think, one thing that I'll say is I know, and I'll probably, ask you some more questions at a later date surrounding that. Mm-hmm. But I would love at another time just to hear some of the challenges that comes with a blended family, because you're not the only person that's come in and, hey man, I got my spouse has kids, and I got kids, my spouse has to adjust or whatever. But as a father, like I said, you saying, hey man, I want to parent this one, and I want to love on him, and I want to show him how to be a man just the same exact way as I'm going to do with my kids. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think that's huge, man. And I know just in the people that I've seen in my life that sometimes that's not always receptive. So I think that's it's a good thing, one, that your wife is on board with it. But two, that like, hey man, you even considering, trying to have a relationship. I know some people are like, nah, that's your son, you deal with this, I make sure he got, the basics, and, we'll kind of go from there. We'll kind of have like a little, maybe like a surface level relationship. And then I know some guys, they kind of taking your approach. It's like, nah, man, you're my son, man.
Yes.
And, we're gonna go from there, man.
Yeah, like I don't, for me, like, a lot of people jump around into that, oh, this my stepdad, my stepson, my stepmom, and all that. I don't even like to use the steps because I feel like that takes away from being one family.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And that's for me. And I know sometimes it's hard to explain, like when you're out and you're introducing people, sometimes, it's the first thing that pop in your mind because you want them to understand, you know, the makeup, and you know, when people hear step, they're like, oh, okay, so this ain't your real, you know, and stuff. But you know, I'm of the mindset that, you know, we're all under one roof. You know, we're one family, and you know, Junior, that's my son. Jay's my son. You know, and you know, I want to love on both of them the same.
Man, I like to hear that, and I mean, you just said something that's definitely interesting, and I'll explore it. I'm curious, and I say this just to see kind of, you know, what you think about it. How did you get to that place in terms of looking at it like, hey man, you know, I don't necessarily want you to use the step in front of it, but you know, like, hey, let's try to keep it as much unity, you know, and instead of like the division, like you said, you understand it, but at the same time, you know, you don't, because I grew up in my stepdad was in my life from the time I was probably about 1 or 2 years old, and I say my stepdad, you know, and it's hard not to say my stepdad. And he's never taken offense to it that I know of. He's never said anything about it. However, when he does refer to me, he refers to me as my son. And so if he's talking about me to somebody else, you know, oh yeah, man, I got 2 boys and this, and this. And so, you know, until you just said that, I never, you know, really considered if he could have taken it, you know, offensively or anything like that. So,
yo,
I'm just curious.
To be honest, for me, my first son, my oldest son, is not my biological.
Okay.
And he changed my mind on that.
Okay.
Because he never really knew his biological father.
Okay.
And, you know, he came into my life when he was 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, and, you know, I raised him as my own. And when he became an young adult, one of the first things he wanted to do, and he never did it, right? But he called me and he said, Dad, I want to change my last name to Sherm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, and I told him he didn't have to do that. Because no matter what, I was always going to see him as my son.
Okay.
And so when he blessed me with that, you know, just his desire to do that, you know, I never, you know, like I said, you know, there were times where somebody said, you know, I would say, oh, this is my stepson. But when he hit me with that, I never again. That's my son. That's my son.
Wow. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.